And we're live. Welcome to this episode of the CISO stream from Barrier. And I'm here to talk to you today. Today's topic is about zero trust and the difference between theory and reality and some of the challenges that organizations are facing when they want to pursue zero trust. And so this is an interesting topic. Zero trust is a huge buzzword right now. There is a lot of people they're saying that they want to pursue it. That it's becoming a focus for organizations. There are countries that have set up entire departments to help other government departments advance in the journey in zero trust. And so there's just a lot of work going on in terms of zero trust. And so I wanted to cover some of the things that I've seen and some of the things that Barrier's clients have seen in the challenges when pursuing zero trust. So there is a lot of theory around zero trust right now. The entire concept started with this concept known as Beyond Corp, and this was written as a theoretical document from Google. And this was designed to rethink how security happens within an organization on all levels. And then later on, it became known as zero trust, where you do not trust anything within the network and you're constantly revalidating trust. But theory is much, much different than practice. And we'll get into what the state of play is in the first half of 2022 right now. And things, of course, are going to change very, very rapidly because there's a huge demand for it. So before I get into that, introduction should be in order. My name is Jordan Schroeder. I am the managing CISO at Barrier. And if you have any comments, any questions, feel free to toss them in the chat and I will kick off the chat. So if you have anything, any questions or any feedback, any responses, throw them in the chat and I will try to answer them as best I can. And if you put any comments after this video, I will also do my best to respond to those. Okay, so if zero trust is a theory, why do we have all this technology? What are we talking about when we're dealing with zero trust? Zero trust is not an end goal. Zero trust is not a destination. Zero trust is a philosophy that is to act as a North Star, right? It is a reference point for you to progress how you do security in your organization through cloud, through local networks, through endpoints, through services. Everything can be redesigned and re-architected and reimagined in its security with zero trust principles as a North Star. You don't buy your way to zero trust. You don't acquire your way to zero trust. There is no checklist to go through to make sure that you've got your way, you've accomplished zero trust. Zero trust is a North Star. It guides, just like the principles of least privileges, the principle of least privilege, the principle of segregation of duties. Some of these other security principles are also guidance principles to help you design and make sure that you are meeting your security goals and you are reducing your risk in the way that you want to using this particular approach. And there's also a set of best practices, yes, but like I said, it's not a destination. You don't accomplish zero trust. Zero trust is a guidance to get you where you want to go. So why do we have zero trust? What is zero trust trying to solve in the first place? Years and years and years ago, when dinosaurs still roamed the earth, when you wanted to authenticate to something on a computer system or a network, you had a password that was assigned to you to that thing. So if you wanted to connect to a database, if you want to connect to a server, if you want to connect to a service, you had a password to that service and you entered each password to each thing you wanted to authenticate to. As you can well imagine, this was not scalable and this didn't work for the long term because you ended up with password fatigue. You had so many different passwords you needed to remember in order to do your job and do your business. So what did we do? What did the security industry do? What did the designers do in order to solve this problem, make this easier? We added a little module in the middle, an authentication module, a means by which you authenticated to the authentication module, and the authentication module gave you access to all these other things. Right, so it would give you a little token. It all happened invisibly underneath the scenes, you got a token so that when you went to connect to the database or the server or the service or whatever it was, you then use the token from the authentication service. And that was your key into all of these things. So you needed only remember one password, but that one password gave you access to everything. All right, so this worked for a really long time, and this was fairly effective, but it also lacked a scalability benefit because what did we do? We introduced the cloud. Hooray! So now, not only are we dealing with the authentication for our own services, now we're dealing with the authentication across federated services, using single sign-on, using OAuth, using so many different authentication modules. So now we have an authentication module, right? That is authenticating us not just to our stuff, but to all the other services that we might be connecting to as well. So now with one password, we can gain access to all of these different services, all controlled by a central point. What's the problem here? The compromise of that password. If your password is somehow weak or compromised or captured or stolen, then that one password grants whoever has that password the keys to the kingdom. They can connect to everything you have legitimate access to. That, of course, is a big problem. So what did we do? We implemented multi-factor authentication, which is a great thing. Yes, enables multi-factor authentication, but it still has this single point of failure problem, and after you've been authenticated, it's a free-for-all. You have access to absolutely everything. So Zero Trust is designed as a philosophy, as an approach to solve this single point of failure problem and this notion that once you're in, and you're in everywhere, right? Trust ends here. As soon as you reach this point, as soon as you're authenticated, you're just assumed to be trusted and you have access to everything. This, of course, has all kinds of problems. So Zero Trust is an approach to apply the principle of least access and the principle of least privilege at scale across everything, so that we're going back to more of that idea that everything we access, that database, that service, that server, has unique authentication every time someone accesses it, but being able to do it at scale, being able to do it even more securely than it was originally, and making sure that we don't end up with password fatigue or people needing to have a billion different passwords for everything. How can we authenticate an endpoint, a user, a device, a service to the thing it needs to connect to in a more robust way, in a more scalable way, in a more dynamic way? As a side point, and I've done presentations of this before, this whole approach means that we might be able to get rid of passwords altogether. That's a separate presentation. That's something completely different, but let's talk about what this means. When we're talking about Zero Trust, what we're talking about doing is still having this central point of authentication, this central point of control. But now this is an exceedingly complex and dynamic policy engine. Now we're not just checking that password and looking it up in the database and saying, oh, off you go. We're now doing this constant, continual, updated, dynamic check of the people, the passwords, the devices, the services, everything we would want to be able to connect to. Those are being constantly evaluated to everything that is being connected to. So instead of just getting your one token, your one key, and you have access to everything, now you have this constant reassessment and this reassurance that what's being connected to is okay. And then, because you have this dynamic, continual authentication, you can now do some pretty fancy things. For instance, double checking that a certain activity on that particular service or target makes sense. So you have an authentication, you have an admin account on a service. Great, no problem. You log in and you're doing stuff. Now, normally on that service, you are looking things up, right? You're reading things, you're getting reports, you're getting information, but you don't normally change things. Now, all of a sudden, you want to change something. You want to change a configuration. You want to do something that might have a greater impact. Now, you can have a situation where this service can point back to the policy engine and say, oh, look, this is something that this user doesn't normally do. This account doesn't normally do this. It has permissions to do it, but it doesn't normally do this. Could we challenge that person to re-authenticate or provide deeper authentication to make sure that it's actually them? So now we have this feedback loop between the services and the authentication service and the authentication engine and the devices, the users, the people, everything that we need to be able to connect to. And we can have this constant reassurance and recheck. That is the goal for Zero Trust. Now, you're going to tell me, that's fine and good. That seems really, 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 really complex. And the answer is yes, it is. And that's part of the problem. Part of the problem that we're dealing with, and if you don't mind me moving around here, part of the problem that we're dealing with is that there are so many moving parts, it can be difficult to connect and start your Zero Trust journey. And there are many, many pieces. And the part of the reality that we're dealing with is that not all of the pieces in every environment, in every organization, has something that can connect to a Zero Trust approach. We're not there yet. There is a lot of technology that is available, that is mature, that's in place, but we don't have 100% coverage of all the possible different pieces that we would need to apply Zero Trust. There are lots of proxies and gateways and things that we can add on to make this easier, but still we've got a lot of gaps in those pieces. So in terms of the theory and the reality is you need to make sure that you are going slow, that you are not trying to boil the ocean in your Zero Trust journey, and you want to make sure that you are tackling those things which already have very mature, very established technology and processes in place so that you can start this journey. You will not finish this journey in a year. You might not finish this journey in a couple years. Things are maturing very, very, very quickly, and the technologies and the tools and the processes and the best practices are emerging, and they're changing, and they're coming into its own right now. So by the end of 2022, we will see change, immeasurable, substantive change in the Zero Trust journey. So if you want to be able to go down this path, you need to go slow. Make sure you involve everyone, all the stakeholders, all the people who use those services. You want to involve as many people as possible because you are changing how people use the tools that you're presenting to them. So make sure you've got a lot of user experience thoughts going in mind. All the stakeholders know what's going on. Your partners, your third parties know what's going on. Make sure you've got a good socialization of these ideas, and make sure you've got everyone's feedback, because the last thing you want is a lot of people throwing up roadblocks as you start this long journey. And the other recommendation is to work with a partner who understands Zero Trust, understands the journey, understands the realities and the blocks that can be in place. And if I might be so bold, Barrier offers a Zero Trust assessment service to help map out where you are, where your low-hanging fruit is, and where your best chances for early success in your Zero Trust journey might be. So if you want any thoughts, if you want any advice, if you want an assessment of your Zero Trust journey, feel free to contact Barrier. And we will work with you and do an assessment of your organization to see where you need to be in your Zero Trust journey. Thank you very much. This has been Jordan Schroeder from Barrier, and good luck in your Zero Trust journey. It's worth it. It's just going to be bumpy for a little bit, but once you get that momentum going, you will see a massive increase, massive measurable increase in your security and a measurable decrease in your risks across your organization. Thank you very much, and see you in the next CISO stream.